Hello, everyone, for joining this session between Alagu and Preetish. The session around key lessons in building and scaling a startup. A great discussion between Alagu and Preetish, who have been in the industry for a while now. So, talking about Alagu, Alagu is a co-founder and CTO of BlueJeans Network, which is a pioneer in enterprise cloud video conferencing and was recently acquired by Verizon. He has over 25 years of research, product, and entrepreneurial experience, bringing in innovative networking and video products to the market. Alagu also co-founded before BlueJeans. He was CTO of Blue Coast Systems, which is now part of Symantec, which was leading its entry into the web security and WAN optimization markets. He joined Blue Coast via acquisition of Entera, a startup which he built video caching products for the content delivery network. Alagu started his career at Apple in their advanced technology group, working on video over networks, and was founding member of the QuickTime streaming team. Alagu earned his BE in EEE at BITS Pilani and MS in computer science at NCSU. While at Pilani, he was the sounds coordinator for Oasis, and that's where his journey began. Talking about Preetish Nijhawan earned his BS in EEE from BITS Pilani and MS in computer engineering from USC, also an MBA from MIT Sloan. He is now the co-founder and partner at Cervin Ventures, an early-stage enterprise venture capital firm. He has worked in numerous companies, including McKinsey & Company, as a consultant and in Intel in various roles in engineering and program management. Preetish is also a co-founder of Akamai Technology. He started that while he was at MIT. Akamai is a publicly traded company on NASDAQ worth $17 billion, which created the content distribution network market. While at Pilani, Preetish double majored in drinking and was editor-in-chief of Cactus Flower, his first entrepreneurial venture. Handing over to Preetish.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's my pleasure to speak with Alagu, my old wingee. First of all, before we start, I'd like to thank BITSAA Silicon Valley for hosting this and arranging this event. Sharmila specifically and Chandra, the CTO, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. So just to get going, Alagu and I, just in terms of history, we go back, as I said, a long way to freshman year in Budh, I think, in 1985. And I remember well because we had the bookends of EEE. I think he was the first. His ID was 005. He was the first in EEE, and I was 155, and I was last. So so I remember that very clearly in my mind. But I just start off with, Alagu, you always loved computers. When did it start?
Yeah, hey, thank you, Preetish. This is awesome that we're able to do this. I guess, it's been like 35 years? I don't know. Since we started, 35 years. There you go. And 28 years, actually, in here in the Valley. Though you double majored in drinking, I have all my alcohol here in the back, so there's none of this virtual background business. You got to show your real background here. That's what this whole session's about. My first experience with computers was really, I was fortunate. I had an uncle who actually traveled, I remember, to the UK, and he got one of those first ZX81s, as they would call it. We'd say ZX over here, but yeah, the ZX81s. This little computer, and he just picked it up, and he didn't know what to do with it. So I got a freebie computer when I was in 8th grade or something like that. And then later, actually, when I was after I finished my 12th, I did convince my dad to spend some money, a reasonable amount of money at that time, to buy a Commodore 64, which I ended up actually bringing with me to college. It's probably one of the first computers in campus. It was
we remember that well.
Yeah. We used to play all these racing games and stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's a pretty early start in tech and all kinds of just geeky stuff.
Yeah, we remember the Commodore 64. I think it was the first computer most of us saw, actually. Alagu was also famous for studying Lineal while lying down. I think that's the memory. I asked all my wingies what our memory of Alagu was. That was the most common one, where he would just be lying in his bed reading Linnell, and then he would go the next morning and crack it, and all of us would, well, not crack it. So, and so in terms of Pilani, what are your, fondest memories, and, are there any learning experience you had from there that actually helped you to grow up and, was a fundamental part of who you are today?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, obviously, the kind of place Pilani was, where you were in this place that was like 5 hours from any rest of civilization, and you were sort of holed up with, a couple of thousand other folks. I mean, that is something that is absolutely hard to come by like today. I mean, even if you are in that sort of environment, you're, I went back 5 years ago, and everybody's on their phones and social media. I mean, we didn't have any of that. And so we had to deal with each other, and just amazing amount of friendships. But I mean, I think the one thing I remember, and I hope through all the changes of any kind that, Pilani keeps, that is the sort of the open-ended and free-form nature of, a lot of things they did. I mean, whether it was class attendance or even, various classes, it was really up to you to do what you wanted to do there. You were completely, after the rigor and all of that of your high school, and, trying to get your, grades to get into a college, you would just come to Pilani, and most people would just completely, the free form, you could go in any direction you wanted. And so you learned pretty early to deal with your decisions and your own consequences, the consequences of the decisions, right? Which is kind of what, Pilani really, for me, in addition to all the people and the technology and all of that you learned, it sort of you learned you had to do what you needed to do. And if you decided not to do it, okay, fine, you deal with the consequences. That was a very early good lesson. I mean, and it's one of the reasons I feel like even today, that culture, to the extent it is there, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are coming out of Pilani today.
Yeah, I think we learned Jugaad. That's for sure. But I think, when I go back there, and then of course, we'll get back. We all came here in, 1989. I remember you went to NC State, and I went off to USC, and then, we met again in the Bay Area, and, you were at Apple. So, talk to me about the early days of Apple, and, give us a little bit of the flavor. This is, of course, pre iPod Apple, right? So it was a different scenario. What was it like? Was Steve even there then, or did he join later? Or, just tell us a little bit about the Apple days.
Absolutely. No, I was there for quite a bit of time. So I was there all through the 90s, basically. So finished grad school, came here. I still remember that trip in 92 when I got a campus interview, sort of recruitment. They flew me out. I think it was the spring of 92. And, staying in Cupertino. I think you were staying in Cupertino as well at that time. And we sort of hung out, and we all went up to San Francisco. And that was actually, I've only missed a flight twice in my life because I overslept. And that was one of the, they actually, in April, they changed times on you. And that was, if you have to get a flight. And so I remember actually, after that trip, interviewing with Apple, going back and actually missing the flight because they changed the time on us. But Apple, I was there all through the 90s, definitely with Steve Jobs back. And I was there, in 96 when we acquired Next. As I said, I was part of the advanced technology group, worked on the first video chat app on 28.8 modems on the Mac. And then when we had 56K modems, that was a pretty big deal, double the bandwidth. So those are the, you had postage style stamp video back on 28.8 modems. And so I was there, Apple, in hindsight, is just incredible. I mean, I was sitting in the audience booing Steve Jobs when he announced that Microsoft had invested, I think, $150 million for a 10% stake in Apple, and they had agreed not to cancel Office. And while it was very classic move on Bill Gates' part, but we were there. Bill Gates actually came on this recorded video, like it was a Flint Center in De Anza, and we were sitting there and we booed Steve Jobs for actually taking money from the evil empire. So, certainly there for all of that. And, I got my green card through Apple and all of, one of my friends used to say, behind every Daisy is like a gut-wrenching green card story, right? So mine was at Apple, and not a bad place to hang out, like in the 90s. Although it had a lot of ups and downs, but amazing learning.
So yeah, and just a couple of things, guys. So before we move on, Alagu and me will be speaking for about another 25 minutes, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So please, send the questions on the chat, and we'll get to as many of them as possible. So then what changed, Alagu? I mean, you were at Apple, you were doing well, and somehow the entrepreneurial bug bit you. What was there a catalyst, or were you always thinking about starting your own company?
Yeah, I mean, I came to this, for me, after grad school, I got sort of two job offers. One was in the Research Triangle Park there in Raleigh, and another one was in the Bay Area. And, for me, hands down, I wanted to come to the Bay Area. And it was really the startup culture that I'd already heard about, all through the 80s. This thing was already vibrant. It was a different set of startups. It was like chip companies and a bunch of other things like that. Compared to sort of where we are today. But, that was something that was always what attracted me. And so, wanted to spend that time in a large company and then go do startups. And, pretty much since then, I have not gone back to a big company until like 2 months ago, right? And Verizon, of course, 130,000 employees. I mean, so even Apple, back when I was there, was only about 20 or 30,000 employees. So, I mean, I think my employee ID was still like 22 for something in the 20,000 numbers. But, for me, I wanted to, always be in a startup. I'm a startup guy. I'm like the 0 to 10, 0 to 50, 0 to $100 million guy, right? I attempted one in the late 90s, and, trying to actually mobile stream audio onto mobile phones before it was even anywhere near, as possible as right now, using actually the voice channel on mobile phones, where you're paying like 20 plus cents a minute. So that didn't quite go anywhere. That the tech worked, so I could actually listen. I used to live up in San Francisco. I actually built this prototype. We used to commute down to Cupertino, and on the way, I could actually dial into a phone number back at my house and stream out the National Public Radio latest broadcast over the phone. But that didn't quite go anywhere. The business model just didn't work. That's when I actually joined sort of the content delivery and caching company, which then became Cashflow and Blue Code.
That's great. And so, why this, since you mentioned Blue Code, I have to get to this question. Why the color blue, right? Blue Code, blue jeans. I'm sure your next one will have a blue as well. What's the reason?
Yeah, so the blue jeans name was actually a placeholder name. It was actually, something that Krish, my co-founder, and I, we were actually spending time as entrepreneurs in residence at Norwest, and I was at Greylock, he was at Excel as well. And we just needed a placeholder name, to incorporate a company and then sort of get going. And we didn't want people to generally know what we were working on. So we didn't, we came up with a name that was just pretty random. I don't know. I think Krish actually came up with a name, and he was like listening to, I think once he was driving in his car and listening to his daughter's playlist or something. And I don't know whether it was the Blue Jeans Neil Diamond song or the Miley Cyrus song, like one of those two was playing. And so we just randomly came up with Blue Jeans. It had nothing to do with Blue Code. But, we did stick with the name. We did try to change the name. We went through naming consultants and a whole bunch of folks, and nobody just came up with some god-awful names. Eventually we negotiated to buy the domain. We didn't have the domain. And people just remembered the name. By then we had already started the first year of business as Blue Jeans, and people just remembered the name. Sort of brought this casual aspect to something that is much more formal from a business meetings point of view.
And how did you come up with the idea, right? The idea, you were the first. I remember this clearly because we were chatting. I was thinking about starting Cervin, and I used to travel here from Texas, and we used to talk about this. And I remember you saying that, listen, we need this platform that you should be able to connect to a video call regardless of device, right? So I remember that clearly. This is 08, 09, I think. And so how did you come up with that idea? What was your inspiration, if there was any, or was it just something that happened over time?
Yeah, no. So I'd obviously worked on this video chat and all of that, like back in the mid '90s, and then sort of moved away into content delivery, CDN, say web security, a whole bunch of other areas. But then, at Blue Coat, we had a team that was geographically distributed across, we had people in Canada, Seattle here, California. We had Eastern Europe and Latvia, and we were using video over like these ISDN lines. Back then, this was like, I'm talking about 99, 2000 timeframe. And it would barely work. You could get it to work like, for that once a week, Monday morning sort of staff meeting, you could get these three offices to talk to each other somehow over video. And then, as you know, like, the 2000 downturn hit and we had to cut costs quite a bit. And so we actually cut anything that was not essential was cut. And so as we went into the 2000s, we cut out video and all of that. And I was running this team that was across, 4 geographies, and having used video and then gone away from video back to audio conferencing, I sort of saw how the team started like not working as well together, drifting apart, and felt like video was sort of the new way to make remote teams and all of that work together. By then, like, companies like Cisco and Google and lots of companies were using video pretty heavily. But if you just go to most companies, it was like 100 billion minutes of audio conferencing and web conferencing. That was how work got done, outside of email. And so we felt very strongly that there was an opportunity here. And you had to make video as easy to use as audio conferencing. People generally, you walk into a conference room, you see a speakerphone on the table, within 30 seconds of walking in, people will know what to do to get on a call with, 5, 10, 20 other people. We wanted to make video as easy as that. And for us, the only way to do that is to not have this notion that, when you want to be on a video call, the other person has to have exactly the same system. So, when you invite somebody to an audio conference, you just give them a number and an ID, and that's it. You don't ask them what phone they're going to use to dial in, or where they're going to be, or they're going to be at home or the office. It's their problem. And so you have to achieve that in video, and that's kind of where some of the interoperability and all of those themes came. Our first product was really, you could just publish a BlueJeans call, and people could dial into it all the way from a Cisco telepresence or a Polycom type system, dial into it on using just a phone, or just plain old vanilla consumer Skype. Like, you could use that to dial into BlueJeans. So conceptually, that's what and we didn't know how to build it, but we just pitched this idea. And we went and talked to a bunch of customers. This is what EIRs do, right? They just come up with these things or put a PowerPoint together. And we actually went and pitched that to customers. And, people loved it and said, okay, well, how are we going to go figure out how to build this?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. But just so that everybody knows, EIR is something called Entrepreneur in Residence. So, people who've started companies successfully before go sit at venture capital firms and they figure out what they're doing next. So, I think, so that's great. And so so how did you go about the early days building your team? What was, how did you go about that? Because a lot of people have ideas, but they don't know how they can get co-founders and, who's CEO, who's CTO, all sorts of questions, right?
Yeah. So, somewhere like sort of halfway through my stint as an EIR, I got introduced to Krish. I mean, we've had a lot, we hadn't worked together, but we had sort of competed with each other. So actually, Krish was running a division at Cisco, their caching division, which actually competed with Blue Coat. And one of our mutual colleagues, Stu, introduced us, and in fact, Stu later became Chief Commercial Officer at BlueJeans as well. He was with us for 5 years. So that's how Krish and I sort of met. He was an EIR as well. And we started collaborating. We both wanted to do something in video. This is when we sort of put all this idea together after, looking at very many different ideas. And then once we got traction from customers that this is what, they would buy, we had to go figure out how to build it. And that was a pretty hard one. For me, after having spent that early years in video, I'd spent a lot more time in, other sort of network technology. So I was a little bit of an industry outsider. I wasn't from Cisco or Polycom or any of these companies that were doing video, or Microsoft or Skype. So we started just talking to all these people and sort of learning. And the early team, we put it together we had the strategy of half and half. We wanted half complete outsiders to the industry and half insiders who had been at some of these other enterprise video conferencing companies. So we did hire a bunch of folks from Polycom and Radvision and Cisco, of course, and other, companies like that had experience. But then, I got people from my Blue Coat days. We got, others completely outside of the industry. So that combination is what, otherwise, if you just have a bunch of industry insiders, you cannot sort of be disruptive. And cloud-based video conferencing and video bridging was at that time, 10 years ago, not something that everybody was doing. And Cisco would try to sell you, a couple of 100,000 piece of gear that you would have to host yourself, and then it would host maybe 50 call legs on it. Nothing that you could scale from a cloud perspective. And then you would do that all on private networks, and all of that we had to bust and sort of build a more cloud-based system, in 2010.
Okay, no, that's so. What were some of the really early issues, right? You're going in completely different, right? You have to build interfaces to Cisco and Skype and everybody else. I remember you telling me, man, everybody else I can deal with, but getting into the Apple, that's the hardest one to get into, the Apple ecosystem.
Oh yeah, no, Apple even today, with we've tried a lot with FaceTime, it's never opened up. But Skype was an interesting one. So I think it's worth sort of sharing that story, which is, so we had this pitch deck, right, that we would make Skype work, but we actually had no clue how to make it work, right? I mean, it was quite a challenge, and so we went and talked to the Skype folks. Fortunately, at that time, Charlie Giancarlo, who was chief development officer for Cisco, and then later he's one of Krish's mentors, and he actually was our board member for a long time. He was at Silver Lake, and Skype was actually owned by eBay, and then later spun out, and Silver Lake acquired them before Microsoft acquired them. So we got connected with Skype, but when we asked Skype, would they open the protocol to talk to a cloud-based system like ours, they said like no chance that they would do that. I mean, it was a completely proprietary protocol. Part of Skype's sort of success in Allure and all of that was the fact that it was completely closed. But we were fortunate. This is where like you have to keep like pounding at something, and then something will fall in place, right? And so they were building Skype to actually run on TVs. And so they were trying to build this SDK that would run Skype on these Samsung and Sharp smart TVs and things like that. And they happened to have not just an ARM SDK, they had a x86 sort of Linux SDK for it as well. And so we convinced them to let us play around with that SDK, saying, we'll see what we can do with this. So what we ended up doing is we took their Linux SDK and we wrapped our software around it so we can run 200 copies of it on a single server. And so then we were able to actually scale, basically essentially faking it out as a Skype client on one side that would talk to you if you were sitting on your end on Skype. And on our end, we could actually run like hundreds of copies of that, and then pull out the audio video from your stream, and then be able to then interoperate with Cisco and Polycom, which were doing a little more standards based. They were using some more open standards. So that's kind of how the Skype TV SDK is how we got sort of started.
Wow. That's great. And look, I think a lot of people are just look at the great end stories of entrepreneurship, but I know every entrepreneur here knows that it's a very, very bumpy road. And there are many near-death experiences before you achieve overnight success after 12 years. So Tell us a little bit about some of the really, as you went through this journey, either from a team standpoint or, partner standpoint, or, how it was to work with Skype, etc. Some of the real near-death experiences that you had.
Yeah, no, it's certainly, I mean, they say you have to revel in uncertainty, right? In any kind of startup. And I mean, the only thing certain is the uncertainty, right? And we've certainly had our share of ups and downs, or, it was a pretty long journey. It was a 10+ year journey. I think in hindsight, the first 5 years were like, pretty crazy, even though they had ups and downs, it was mostly sort of in the upward direction. And I mean, we went from $0 to $75 million in revenue in less than 5 years. And then we sort of hit a lot of the stalls and all of that. But I think one of our near-death experiences was, after having pulled off this coup of nobody thought we could actually interoperate with Skype, and we pulled this off, and actually that put us on the map until Microsoft acquired them. And pretty much overnight, that license that we had used with that SDK got pulled off from under us, and we were literally given 6 months to stop using it. And so that was pretty much from, and we were like $20+ million in revenue at that time. So lots of large customers like paying us for this. Yeah, but that didn't matter. And so when they did that, we had to scramble and go build. So the first incarnation of BlueJeans, we actually were a completely cloud-based service. We did not have any kind of clients. Like, we didn't have a desktop app, a mobile app, no browser-based. It was basically you could bring whatever app you want and dial into us. And so we had to scramble for that year and really build an alternate strategy. We initially sort of built on browsers. So we actually built, if there's one app that was more popular than Skype at that time, it was your browser, right? So we basically said, we're going to just build this into a browser. And we built a plugin into a browser. And we had to do that like in record time, like within a year, and move all of our customer base over from using Skype into the browser. So that, then we've had some other iterations, browsers dropped plugins, and we had to then go to apps, and then WebRTC came. And so we've had like some gyrations of this variation of this Skype sort of getting pulled off from under us. That was one. I remember, in October of 2014, when we were at our peak, almost $50 million in revenue, we had an 8-hour outage. And I can tell you that was one of the most painful 8 hours that I've sort of been through. It was, when people start depending on your service, it's a great thing, right? But with that comes a huge amount of responsibility. And there are things, you hear people say, don't optimize too early, and things like that when you build a system, right? I don't know, that's wrong advice. I feel like, maybe in some context it is good, but when it comes to redundancy and resilience, especially in today's cloud-based world, I would spend a lot of time very early sort of making sure you've architected your system right to be redundant. The more people start depending on it, there's an expectation that you're 24/7 with not even time, no downtime to do upgrades or obviously outages and all of that, right? And so that was a pretty big wake-up call for us. We had grown like crazy, for the previous 4 years, and we had, there's a tendency to sort of focus on customer-facing features and functionality versus, some of this basic stuff like around redundancy and resilience and scale. And so definitely, that advice about don't optimize early, absolutely you should optimize early when it comes to, the resilience of your service, especially cloud-based startups.
All right. So, I will get to the to COVID and Zoom. But first, I think one of the key things that nobody talks about is the impact of being an entrepreneur, or a serial entrepreneur like you are, on family, right? So, talk to us a little bit about how hard it's been, and both dealing with with growing kids, and also what do you do for fun? I know sailing, beer, etc. But how did you find time for all these things as you're in this incredible strenuous environment?
Yeah, no, I mean, 10 years. My kids, one was in starting kindergarten. Another one was in, I think, still finishing elementary school. One's in college now, and the other one's in high school. So, I mean, 10 years go by like really fast. So, make sure you figure out how you're going to spend that time with family. I mean, for me, family has been hugely supportive. Tevane, who's also a BITSian from our batch, I think many of you and others know. She is, like, in many ways the opposite of me in terms of, sort of, the some of the craziness and the extremes that I go to on some things. She's much more sort of even keeled and mellow, and has been very good at sort of giving me direct feedback when I get a little out of hand and put me in my place. And contextually, I think like, oh, I'm like dealing with this, like the biggest problem. And she's like, oh, wow, it's like, your stuff is trivial. Like, just go deal with it. Like, just, so she's very good at like giving that type of, very direct feedback. And so are my kids as well. I mean, they're pretty good at being sort of direct. And so, I think, making sure you spend time with family is important. I mean, I could have done more, should have done more, but so I advise everybody to do more on that front, because this time will go by. I think in terms of just outside of work activities, I mean, I think it's always good for everybody to have something that they do that it has to be a context switch from your work, right? It can't be something which you do that is like, if you're I don't know, maybe it's different. I mean, I'm not a runner or a biker, but I feel like when I'm running or biking, I'm always thinking about something, like, and I'm sort of thinking about some work stuff, right? Whereas, I've been a water sport guy for a long time, and sailing is about as geeky a water sport as you can get, like, all the physics and the tech that goes with it. But the one thing that sailing has given me is, once I'm out there on the water, like, the helm of a boat, or like, crewing for someone, you're just like completely context switched from work. I mean, you have no time to like even like deal with any thoughts around work. You're just dealing with that moment. And I think that's important for any, whether it's a recreational activity like that or something else you do, where you completely have to context switch. Yes. And so, that's one piece of advice.
So let's get to, a few years into the startup, things are going great. And then this Zoom guy comes along. What was your response when they came around? What do you think, happened in the industry at that time? So just talk to me a little bit about that journey, and, not just Zoom, but other competitors at that time as well.
Yeah, there was Zoom, there was Microsoft, there was Cisco, of course, always, and, there was Polycom, and there's like others in, in the larger web conferencing space. I mean, for us, Zoom got started around the same time, like 2011, 2010 timeframe. And we came from very different sort of approaches to this. I talked about our goal was really to sort of open up this market and make it interoperable and all of that. And pretty much every other player, even today, has done just the opposite, including Zoom. I mean, Zoom came more from a web conferencing world, from the WebEx sort of folks there. And so for us, we really felt the future was in video, to the extent that we said, all this web conferencing, it's just a screen sharing, just to add on the video, and audio conferencing is going to die out. It eventually did. But, in the growth days, a lot more people were comfortable with the web conferencing approach, right? They weren't ready sort of to use video. I mean, COVID has really transformed that. But sort of coming from, say, using GoToMeeting or WebEx or any of that and converting them into using BlueJeans was never our sort of approach to it, right? It was more around sort of getting net new people to use video, and video first, and video in these larger conference rooms and other types of settings. So we came from very different angles, whereas Zoom, really sort of was all about, we'll add video, but let's go grab as much market share out of the, the WebExes and the GoToMeetings of the world. And so to that extent, we never really went after a freemium type of approach. We didn't go, we were a much more heavier sort of enterprise sales type approach. So, I mean, if you sort of take that initial starting theme, a lot of other decisions sort of came out of that. And then to a large extent, even after they came out and we saw them succeed, I mean, we hit our 50 million mark and 75 million mark way ahead of them. But when we saw them succeed, there was still a lot of reticence to sort of get dragged into the mud with 50 different web conferencing companies, right? And so I think that's sort of the difference between, they sort of had been there, done that, and they sort of just went and did a rinse and repeat with video added to it, right? Whereas we sort of came with, and we learned a lot, like, a lot of the scalability stuff that we've learned from the first time experiencing it versus the second time, right? So I think that, so that helps. I mean, obviously, I go do it again, like, I have a lot more like experience now.
No, but and we'll end after the Q&A. So one question, then we'll go to Q&A, guys. So talk to us a little bit about COVID, right? Your traffic just must have exploded. So what do you see? One, how did you guys react? And two, where is the world? And this is one of the questions actually. Where is the world, you think, headed towards from a work from home standpoint post COVID?
Yeah. So let's talk about COVID. I mean, I think as you know, we are part of Verizon now, and that whole M&A happened in parallel with all of the COVID. So the month of March was just ridiculous. I mean, so we're having M&A meetings all on Blue Jeans on one side. I was basically pretty much alternating between M&A meetings and like scaling meetings, right? And so I remember the second and third week of March were just ridiculous. Like there was a week when Facebook actually called us and told us like they were actually going to send all their employees home, and they're one of our early customers. They were a customer when they were 1,000 people to now when they have 50,000 people. They've been a Blue Jeans customer. So if you do any kind of conference calls with Facebook, it's on Blue Jeans. So they said they were going to send everybody home. We said, hey, no problem. I mean, you think you're going to double your traffic? That's fine. And they said, yeah, that's what we think. And so they came and they did it. And then the next day, like Adobe called us. The next day, Coke called us. Everybody's like same theme. So by the end of that week, we'd already gone up like 50% overall in our traffic. So that was a Friday. I think it was the second week. And then between the Friday and the Monday of the third week, we had gone up another like 50 to 75%. And so we were just scrambling all week to just keep adding more capacity. That third week of March, between the Monday and the Thursday, we went up 250% in traffic. And so essentially over 4 days, like literally people would eat, sleep, and be on a war room call, sort of adding capacity. We were running about 80%, early in February, we were running 80% of our capacity in our own 4 Equinix colos, and AWS was taking some overflow traffic of about 20%. Today, or basically over that 3-week period, it flipped around. 70% of our traffic is handled now in AWS, and those data centers are only handling like 30% of the traffic. So this dramatic shift literally happened over like right before your eyes, like within that sort of 1 week period. And that's incredible. I mean, I can tell you all of the guys who are part of the team have learned so much like through that process.
That's amazing. So tell me, I'm just going to go into questions now, from our good friend Ashmeet. Hey man, so Ashmeet's question is, how did you come up, for the idea of Blue Jeans? Did you consider any other ideas? How did you know this was the one?
Yeah, so I spent a year as an EIR. So spending time as an EIR is a little bit of a double-edged sword, right? I mean, you're hanging out. I think Ashmeet is a VC himself, right?
Yes.
Is he? Yeah. So you're hanging out with all these VCs that every day looking at business plans and finding ways to poke holes within them, and you have to like somehow sort of do that and sort of have the more positive attitude of how you're going to make this work, right? So you come up with an idea, and there's like 15 different ways in which you can poke a hole in it. But like you got to find those 2 different ways in which you can actually build on it. And so I mean, we did go through like 10 different ideas, and having come out of Blue Code, I looked at a lot of things in the security space, And it is a very vibrant space to do a lot of things in, as you guys all know. But somehow I just wanted a different thing I wanted to do. I wanted to sort of go back to video. So, but we did go through lots of different ideas before we converged.
Okay, these questions have likes also. Okay, the one with the most likes is this one. It's from Animesh Thambi, and he said, if you were a BITSian graduating today, would you start up in India or move to the US and do a startup here? I think it's a great question.
I would look at India first, but it depends on the space. So if you're going to go after the consumer space and things like that, I would definitely look at India first. If you're looking at the enterprise space, I would look at not the US, but I would look at it more globally, right? So, and then depending on whether you need to be in the US or not is a decision depending on sort of where you can build that global go-to-market from. It could be in US, it could be in Europe. Being in the Valley is obviously, you get connected, all the rest of the ecosystem here. But yeah, I think if you're going after the enterprise and business market, you could still build a tech in India or wherever, a combination of places. But look at the US from a go-to-market perspective. But for consumer, definitely India. And once you sort of have success in India, you can expand. I don't know if there's been any examples of that, but I can see that happening very easily.
Yeah, and what about some questions about H1B, F1 these days, and what's the process? How hard is it for entrepreneurs to start a company now in the US? Do you have any advice?
Yeah, man, life has gotten quite complicated. I remember, Preetish, when you and I were getting our green cards, I think you were at Intel, I was at Apple, and you guys at Intel was doing amazingly well at that time, and you guys all got your green cards really fast, and I actually waited 6 years through the ups and downs of Apple to actually get my green card. In hindsight, man, I look at it now, and it's just kind of crazy. It's very much it's just not... It's not worth the time and the amount of cycles you spend personally worrying about this. So I guess to that extent, I would go start really building a company. And if I were to do this again, I would start building the company in India. As we're building out the go-to-market, figure out a way to expand here, get funding here and all of that, and then sort of come here through whatever visa as part of that. Right? Rather than the more traditional approach of coming here first, going through and getting your, H1 and green card and all that before starting a company, because that'll just put a 10-year dent into your timing. It's not worth it. You can do amazing things sitting in India or anywhere else.
Yeah, but I do agree with you. For enterprise, at some point you're going to have to come here, right? Or at least the large part of the go-to-market team would likely be in the US, right?
Yeah, but enterprise as well. I would encourage a lot of people to figure out a lighter weight go-to-market model for enterprise rather than the heavy feet on the street. The amount of money that sucks, I can tell you from personal experience. Right. It is incredible. And so if you come here and then you end up raising a bunch of money, there's this tendency to basically go spend that money on go-to-market and sales and marketing. Whereas if you stay frugal and stay in India and figure out how to do it in a much more lightweight manner, I think longer term that may work out well. But, these are all very general advice. It has to be specific to your situation.
So I'm going to combine a couple of questions, Alagu. So, one is, and how did you get your first, how did you go from 0 to 50, 100 customers, and then from 100 to 1,000? Was there something that fundamentally changed in the way the team members you added, technology?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think for the first, the first 50 customers are very much driven by the early team that's actually building the product and the founders actually making the sale. And Krish and I have, Krish especially, we've done, you can go back and look at every one of the first 50 customers, and it would be either either one of us being very closely involved in getting them. But once you do that, you have to find a way to scale, right? And for us, we at that point we added quite a bit to the team. And this is one of the areas where it is useful to actually go back and get people from that industry. So we actually did hire, Shadi from from WebEx, who ran our sales for the long time. He actually took us from 0 to 75 million in sales. So he was an ex-WebEx, and hire somebody who's been at a more like a director level in one of these previous companies, so that they're hungry and they want to sort of build for in a new company. So on the sales front, absolutely, we have to find a way to scale. And what you did for the first 50 customers is not going to work. We got a lot of intros through our own sort of networks. LinkedIn is just amazing, in terms of you finding people. Nowadays, if you can't find somebody like in LinkedIn, they don't exist, right? Yeah.
So, again, questions by Preeti and Vanita. So, Preeti, I'll combine them both. So, one is, how do you keep yourself? What's the secret of, energy? It's very hard to build a startup. There's such ups and downs. How do you keep yourselves motivated and calm during that period? And, the corollary to that question, because I think they're related, is how do you build a transparent and wonderful culture, which I know you're very proud of at Blue Jeans? How did you, take your own personality, energy, and then build the right culture at the company?
Yeah. So, I talked about the second one. Krish and I felt very strongly about transparency, and all through the times we've been very transparent with our team. So the exact same presentation that we would present to the board of directors would be what we would present to the employee base, right? There's no sort of one version for one and one version for the other. To the extent, Krish, and this is his idea, but it was kind of interesting. We took it to the extreme where we actually broadcast the board meetings for like a couple of years. So literally, you'd be like in this reality TV show, and the 200 plus employees watching the board meeting. That was a little weird for like a lot of our board members to start with, but people got used to it. So we did some crazy things like that. I don't know that in the end that experiment. One thing I felt strongly about is there's different measures of success, right? There's you can have huge amount of revenue, customer base, successful exit, valuation, all of that. For me, I feel one of the measures of success is how many people who have been at Blue Jeans will go out and start new companies and become entrepreneurs, right? And for us, letting them see how this whole thing, was built out, giving them the transparency would give them the confidence to be able to actually go do that. And so that was always one of my motivations is, how many people would actually do that? And there are several examples of that already, of people going and starting. So, and I will continue to help and foster that.
No, that's great. And so I think the interesting question here is that if you could
there's a first part to that question. Sorry, I forgot.
Yeah, your energy, man.
Well, you gotta take these breaks, and this is where Devane is so good. Like 3 full weeks every year we took vacation, where we would context switch, go somewhere, once in December, once in summer, and either Thanksgiving or spring break, and we would just check out, and so that gave me a good 3-4 months between crazy amounts of work. So that is super important. Some people just don't take a lot of vacation. I think that's just bad. You cannot go at this pace without doing that.
Okay, this question on Angad. If you could time travel back to day one of Blue Jeans and share 3 key lessons with your former self, with the intention of saving yourself mistakes and heartache, what would they be?
Well, I think I've talked about a few here. I think when it comes to, they talk about, how, you always have to keep pivoting, right? And your ideas, what we had to do would change. So that is something I knew, but I sort of didn't know to the extent that you had to do that. Like, I mean, like there are things that we would have pivoted even harder than we did. Like, even though we pivoted, it was a very slight pivot, right? We would have pivoted a lot harder. I talked about this whole like premature optimization. I think that's a bad piece of advice when it comes to resilience and redundancy in this cloud-based world. Like, you got to sort of think through. I mean, design for success, right? Like, assume that this is going to succeed, and like, whether you'll be ready to sort of scale. And so you got to do that. So that's two things I can sort of off the top of my head.
Cool.
Yes, I'm sure there's quite a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I was going to ask you this question, but it's being asked on the Q&A. So, what's next? You're going to become an angel investor after Verizon? Are you going to start something new? What space, if the latter, what spaces excite you?
Yeah, no, I already do some amount of angel investing. I mean, but I'm the kind of guy that, I mean, I can't do backseat driving. Like, I need to be there in the trenches doing stuff. So I'll probably do a combination of both. So yeah, I will do investing, and I love working with entrepreneurs. I already am working with several even BITSian entrepreneurs. So that's great. But definitely we'll be doing something. I think there's a lot of opportunity here. I'm going to be here for a couple of years, make sure this is successful. There's a lot to learn here at Verizon. It's the largest telco in the world, by market cap, and one of the largest, even otherwise. It's the largest mobile provider. And this whole video communications and communications as an area is just getting started. I mean, you may think like it's all like done, but we're just getting started. I mean, COVID helped us accelerate it. Here's what I think about this, right? I think the ability to remotely communicate, like what we're doing today, is a basic human right. I mean, it's like your right to freedom of speech and privacy and liberty and all of that stuff. Like the ability to communicate without a couple of companies or countries controlling what you can on how you can communicate is a basic human right. And I think there's a lot more to do. I feel like we're sort of from the early vision of what we wanted to build at BlueJeans. The world has gone a little sideways. We've become more proprietary, I feel like. And so I think there's an opportunity to go still do some interesting things here. And also, we're just getting started with a lot of interesting technologies around AR, VR, and how that would apply to some of this remote communication, right? We're just like scratching the surfaces right now.
And work from home, you think that's here to stay? If so, to what degree?
Absolutely, it is here to stay. I mean, obviously, none of us want it to the degree it is right now. But you'll see, I mean, I have this sort of theme that I talk about internally. We use that as our sort of little bit of a mission vision statement, which is better than being there, right? And so as an industry, I think our focus really needs to be, we've got this technology, we've got to build this technology to a point where it's actually better than meeting in person, right? So if I had a choice of actually going and meeting you, like both of us live very close to each other, if I had a choice of going to meet you right now versus actually having a call with you on BlueJeans, and for many reasons, if I actually feel like the BlueJeans experience is actually going to be better, because it's easier to actually share like that 2 minutes we were talking about some piece with somebody else. It's easier to have other analytics and other things here. I mean, it's like all the tools, it'll be almost like you're wearing an Iron Man suit when you're on BlueJeans, whereas you're like naked if you're meeting in person, right? So I think that's kind of where the technology can get to, right? Where it's better than actually being there.
All right. So we just have 3 minutes left. So I want to talk about a couple of fun things, and we still have a couple of minutes. I'll get back. So tell me about some of the funnest things that happened to you while doing BlueJeans, or the cool investors you met, or something that just like, you're like, look back and say, oh Lord, that was fantastic.
Oh yeah, well, there's been, I think firstly, just, hanging out with the team and having a lot of fun with the team. I mean, I actually, went to Bangalore like every 3 months, 4 months, right? And I loved, obviously the good thing is I got to meet my parents, like, at a much higher cadence than I would have if I was doing something entirely here. So, but then just hanging out with the team there was a lot of fun, both here and there. I think there's a lot of, we've had, we sort of had a little foray into the B2C space where we got involved with Derek Jeter, like one of the, all-time, baseball athletes, just an incredible guy. He actually invested in Blue Jeans. So that was some really interesting things that we did with him. I think spending a lot of time with the sales team and selling and having fun with them. I think the only other time, I said one time I missed my flight with you. The other time was with the sales guys in Vegas. So there were definitely some fun days.
That's awesome. So, a couple of questions we just have. I'll just take this as the right question. The last one is, around how do you decide M&A versus IPO? And, what are some key terms that were really important in M&A, to the extent that you can speak about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the end, whether it's M&A or IPO, it's one more event in the journey, right? And I think it's important where you take into account all the stakeholders. Where there's shareholders, there's employees, there's customers, and what is the right thing to do, right? And in some cases, it is the right thing to do to like stay independent and play the long game and actually go for the IPO. And we were certainly looking at that as one of the options, and were thinking about that. For us, as we started having these discussions, and the discussions with Verizon have been going on for more than a year. So it's not like this is something that happened just over COVID or something. We had discussions with them last year, almost consummated a deal, and then had a more of a partnership and reseller relationship with them. And we really felt that it was the right thing to do for all constituents, the customers, the shareholders and investors, and the employees, that being part of this larger mothership and what we could do to actually further the product and many things. So that's what, it's not a black and white decision. You got to take into account all those stakeholders, and, there's no one way. I mean, even to the last day, there was debates. There were people that actually wanted to still stay independent, keep going long. And we felt there was the right time to actually be part of a larger entity. And I'm very thrilled, among all the telcos I worked with. I mean, Verizon is just outstanding. I mean, Hans, who runs that, is doing just an amazing job as a leader, and trying to bring back innovation and the kind of properties they own, like under their umbrella, from Yahoo to TechCrunch to Huffington Post to many other, like the wireless and 5G. And what we can do with all of that. I mean, just the platform on which we could actually build, it was very compelling for us.
Well, thanks a lot. Look, as predicted, we could have gone a long time. If I didn't get to your questions, audience, I'm sorry. It's just we are time constrained here. So thanks a lot, Alagu. Congratulations again on a great exit for the second time. And next time I hope you let me invest in your startup, so maybe I can afford it this time. But
absolutely.
But thanks a lot, and thank you to BITS, and I'm wearing my BITS T-shirt, of course. But it's I guess end of BITSian weekend, so thank you for everything. And I think on behalf of Alagu as well, thanks for the opportunity for us to just share a few thoughts about his experiences. Alagu, any last words?
Yeah, no, thank you everyone from BITS, and just feel free to reach out to me, like over LinkedIn or whatever way. I'm always I'd love to meet more BITSians or even entrepreneurs. So yeah, thank you.
Before ending, I would like to add one thing. We have a follow-up session after this on BITSians, BITSians Day Spirit. I will share the details in chat. If you have not joined that already, you can join. And thanks, Preetish and Alagu, for delivering this such a great content. We had so many questions. That shows the how audience is interested.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.